The silence in a hospital room is never truly silent. There's always a low, electronic hum. The soft beep of a monitor you learn to ignore. The whisper of the air conditioning. But in that moment, the only sound I could hear was the tiny, snuffly breath of the life I held in my arms. My son. He was perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, a dusting of dark hair on his head that was so soft it felt like a dream. He was wrapped in a simple white blanket, his small chest rising and falling against mine. The weight of him was the most profound and grounding thing I had ever felt. It was a weight that said, I am here. I am yours. My husband, Leo, was asleep in the uncomfortable-looking chair in the corner, his head lolled to one side. He'd been awake for nearly 48 hours, his hand never leaving mine, his voice a steady, calm anchor in a sea of pain and exhaustion. Seeing him finally get some rest filled me with a quiet, fierce love. It was just me and my baby, cocooned in the dim light of dawn creeping through the window. It was peace. Then the door creaked open. I looked up, my body tensing instinctively, a primal urge to shield my newborn son from the world. It was Brenda, my father's girlfriend. She stood in the doorway, a wide, bright smile plastered on her face. It was the kind of smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Her eyes were different. They were wide, almost feverish, and locked onto the small bundle in my arms with an unnerving intensity. She moved into the room not like a guest, but like someone with a purpose, her steps quiet and deliberate. "Oh, Amelia," she breathed, her voice a high, airy whisper. "He's beautiful. Absolutely perfect." She didn't look at me when she said it. Her gaze was fixed, unblinking, on my son. She drifted closer to the bed, a scent of strong perfume trailing behind her, sharp and unwelcome in the sterile air. I pulled the blanket a little tighter around him. My heart was starting to beat faster, a low, warning drum against my ribs. "Hi, Brenda," I said, my voice hoarse. "It's a little early." "I couldn't wait," she said, dismissing my words with a wave of her hand. She was beside the bed now, leaning over me. Her shadow fell across us. I just had to see him. Our little boy. Our little boy. The word hung in the air, cold and heavy. She reached out her hands, her fingers wiggling slightly. It wasn't a gesture asking for permission. It was an expectation. "Let me hold him. Please. I've been dreaming of this moment." Her eyes were glistening, a strange mix of desperate hunger and adoration. And in that moment, every polite excuse, every gentle deflection I had rehearsed in my mind, evaporated. All that was left was a wall of pure, unshakable instinct. The instinct of a mother protecting her child. I shifted, turning my body slightly so my son was further from her reach. I looked directly into her eyes, my voice coming out low and clear, colder than I had ever heard it before. "Brenda, don't." She froze, her hands hovering in the air. Her smile faltered. "What?" "Do not touch my baby." The silence that followed was no longer peaceful. It was thick and suffocating. The hum of the machine seemed to grow louder. Brenda's face cycled through a series of emotions: confusion, then hurt, then a flash of something dark and resentful. She finally pulled her hands back, clasping them in front of her as if to stop them from reaching out again. Leo stirred in his chair, mumbling in his sleep. The moment was broken, but the feeling remained. A deep, unsettling dread. This was not the beginning of a beautiful relationship between a grandmother figure and her grandson. This was the culmination of something that had gone terribly, horribly wrong. But that was the end. The beginning, like most troubling things, was much simpler. It was a sunny Tuesday in Portland, 6 months earlier, a day that felt full of promise. The rain had finally let up after a week of classic Oregon gloom, and the city seemed to be breathing a collective sigh of relief. Leo and I were sitting in our favorite coffee shop, a little place in the Hawthorne district with mismatched chairs and the rich, dark smell of roasted beans that always made me feel at home. I was tracing the rim of my decaf latte, my mind buzzing with a secret that felt too big to hold inside me for another second. Leo reached across the table and covered my hand with his. "You okay? You've been staring at that cup like it holds the secrets to the universe." I looked up at him, at his kind, steady eyes and the small smile playing on his lips. He was my rock. An architect by trade, he was a man who understood structure, who knew how to build things that last. Our life together felt like that, solid, safe, and carefully constructed on a foundation of trust and easy laughter. "It does, kind of," I said, a smile finally breaking through my nerves. I turned my hand over and laced my fingers with his. "Leo, we need to tell my dad today." His smile widened. "I thought that was the plan. Are you getting cold feet?" "No. It's just saying it out loud to him makes it real. Irrevocably real." "Amelia, it's been real for 8 weeks," he said softly, squeezing my hand. "The little blob on that ultrasound picture was pretty real." I laughed. He was right. It was real. I was pregnant. After a year of trying, of quiet hopes and hushed disappointments, it had finally happened. We were going to have a baby. A tiny human who would be half me and half him. The thought was both terrifying and utterly, breathtakingly wonderful. My dad, Robert, arrived 10 minutes later, looking exactly like the retired history teacher he was. He wore a slightly rumpled tweed jacket, his graying hair was a little messy, and he had a copy of a thick, historical biography tucked under his arm. His face lit up when he saw us, the lines around his eyes crinkling in a way that always reminded me of my childhood. "There are my 2 favorite people," he said, leaning down to kiss my cheek. The smell of old books and coffee clung to him, a scent that was pure comfort. After he'd settled in with his black coffee, we made small talk. He told us about the new bird feeder he'd installed, and the surprisingly aggressive squirrels who had laid siege to it. We talked about Leo's latest project, a sustainable community center downtown. The conversation was easy, familiar. But the secret I was holding felt like a buzzing, living thing under my tongue. Finally, Leo gave me a subtle nod. It was time. "Dad," I started, my voice a little shaky. "We have some news. Something we wanted to tell you in person." He leaned forward, his expression shifting from relaxed to attentive. "Is everything all right?" I took a deep breath and slid a small envelope across the table. It was the picture from our first ultrasound. The little blob. He picked it up, a confused look on his face. He pulled out the glossy photo. He stared at it for a long moment, his brow furrowed. And then, his eyes widened. He looked from the photo, to me, to Leo, and back to the photo. A slow, disbelieving smile spread across his face, followed by the unmistakable shine of tears welling in his eyes. "Oh, Ames," he whispered. "Are you is this?" I just nodded, my own eyes filling up. "You're going to be a grandpa." The joy on his face was pure and overwhelming. It was everything I had hoped for. He got up from his chair and wrapped me in a bear hug that lifted me slightly off my seat. "This is the best news. The absolute best news I've had in years. A baby." He pulled back, holding me by the shoulders, his face beaming. "A new little person in the family. Oh, your mother Eleanor would have been over the moon." Hearing him mention my mom sent a familiar pang through my heart. She'd been gone for 10 years, taken by a cancer that was swift and cruel. My dad had been adrift for a long time after she passed, the two of them having been an inseparable team. I had been forced to grow up fast, to become the responsible one, the one who made sure he was eating, the one who managed the household logistics while I was still just a college kid. We had found a new normal, but her absence was a permanent space in our family. "I know she would have," I said softly. He hugged Leo, clapping him on the back with a force that made him stumble. The whole coffee shop was probably watching, but I didn't care. It was a perfect moment. "We have to celebrate," he declared, sitting back down, his energy infectious. Dinner. This weekend. My house. I will cook something special. He hesitated for a fraction of a second on the word "we'll," and I caught it. We? I asked gently. He cleared his throat, a faint blush creeping up his neck. Yes. I'd love for you to finally have a proper dinner with Brenda. She's been wanting to get to know you better. And now with this news. She's going to be so excited. Brenda. I had met her twice, very briefly. Once at a crowded neighborhood block party and once when I dropped off some mail at my dad's house. She was a real estate agent, about 15 years younger than my dad. She was polished, energetic, and had a smile that seemed permanently affixed to her face. She was the first serious relationship he'd had since my mom died, and for that, I was genuinely grateful. He seemed less lonely, less haunted by the quiet in the house we grew up in. Of course, Dad, I said, pushing down a small, unidentifiable flicker of apprehension. We'd love that. The dinner was on Saturday. Walking into my childhood home always felt strange now. It was still the same house, with the same scuff mark on the entryway wall from my bike when I was 10, the same faint scent of my mother's favorite lemon polish. But there were new things, too. A sleek, modern coffee machine on the counter. Different throw pillows on the sofa. Small, subtle changes that marked Brenda's presence. Brenda met us at the door, pulling me into a hug that was a little too tight, a little too long. Amelia. Leo. I am so thrilled for you both, she gushed. Your dad told me the news, and I think I actually squealed. We are just so excited. We. There was that word again. She led us into the living room where my dad was beaming, holding 2 glasses of sparkling cider. The evening started well enough. Brenda was a lively conversationalist, asking all the right questions about my work, about Leo's projects. She was charming. But as the night wore on, the focus of the conversation narrowed, circling exclusively around the baby. My baby. I've already been looking at cribs online, Brenda announced as she served the roasted chicken. There are so many options now. Do you think you'll want a traditional wood finish or something more modern and white? I glanced at Leo. I was barely 9 weeks pregnant. We hadn't even thought about cribs. Oh, we haven't really gotten that far yet, I said politely. There's still plenty of time. Nonsense, she laughed, a bright, tinkling sound. Time flies. Before you know it, our little one will be here. We have to be prepared. Our little one. She kept going. She talked about organic baby food, the best car seats on the market, and the importance of reading to the baby in utero. It felt less like a conversation and more like a lecture. My dad just sat there, smiling and nodding, soaking in her enthusiasm. He looked so happy, so energized, and I didn't have the heart to put a damper on it. I told myself she was just trying to be helpful. She was excited to be a part of the family. It was a good thing. Later, as I stood up to help clear the plates, Brenda put a hand on my arm to stop me. Oh no, you sit. You need to rest. Then, before I could react, she reached out and placed her hand flat on my stomach. It was still completely flat, with no hint of a bump. Her touch felt possessive, proprietary. I just can't believe there's a little life in there. A little piece of your dad. It's a miracle. I froze. I'm not a touchy-feely person with people I don't know well, and this felt like a massive breach of an unspoken boundary. I took a small step back, forcing her hand to drop. It's still very, very early, I said, trying to keep my voice light. She didn't seem to notice my discomfort. Her eyes were shining again with that same intense light I would come to recognize and dread. I was just telling Robert, she said, turning to my dad, we should really think about the guest room. We could put a changing table in there, get it all set up for when you bring the baby over. It could be like a second nursery. My dad nodded enthusiastically. Great idea, honey. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. A second nursery? In my mother's house? They weren't talking about a pack-and-play for an occasional overnight stay. They were talking about a permanent installation. It was too much, too soon. It felt like they were laying claim to a part of my child's life before he was even born. Driving home that night, the silence in the car was heavy. I stared out at the passing streetlights of Portland, my mind replaying the evening. The constant we and our, the hand on my stomach, the talk of a second nursery. Finally, Leo spoke, his voice gentle. She's a lot. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. A lot is one word for it. She seems to think this is her baby, too, he said, hitting the nail right on the head. Thank you, I said, relief washing over me. I was starting to think I was going crazy. That I was just being oversensitive. You're not, he said firmly, reaching over and taking my hand. You're pregnant, and you're a little protective. That's normal. She's the one who's overstepping. By a lot. I squeezed his hand, grateful for his sanity, for his validation. What do we do? For now. Nothing, he said calmly. We smile, we nod, and we set our own pace. She's excited. Maybe it'll calm down. But as I lay in bed that night, I had a sinking feeling that it wouldn't. This wasn't just excitement. It was something deeper, something more consuming. And it was aimed directly at my child. This was only the beginning. Leo's prediction that Brenda's initial fervor would calm down turned out to be spectacularly wrong. It was as if the dinner party had opened a floodgate, and now we were caught in the deluge. My phone, which was usually a quiet place reserved for client emails and texts from a few close friends, became a constant source of anxiety. Brenda had gotten my number from my dad, and she used it with relentless enthusiasm. It started with links. Articles about the top 10 dangers lurking in your home for a newborn, or why your unborn baby needs to listen to Mozart. Then came the photos. Screenshots of baby clothes, strollers with complex suspension systems, and high-tech bassinets that promised to mimic the womb. Each message was accompanied by a flurry of heart and baby emojis and a chipper, "Isn't this adorable? We should get it." I tried to be polite, responding with a simple, "Thanks for sharing," or "That's cute," but my brevity didn't deter her. If anything, it seemed to encourage her. The messages became more frequent, more demanding of my attention. I started putting my phone on silent for long stretches of the day, just to have some peace. The unsolicited advice wasn't just digital. It started seeping into every interaction. One afternoon, my dad called. After a few minutes of pleasantries, he said, "So, Brenda was saying she read a study about folic acid. She's a little worried you might not be getting enough. She wants to buy you a special prenatal vitamin she found online." "Dad, my doctor has me on a prenatal vitamin," I said, trying to keep the irritation out of my voice. "I'm fine. Everything is fine." I know, Ames. But she just cares so much. She sees this as a second chance, you know." "A second chance at what?" I asked, a chill running down my spine. He hesitated. "Well, you know. To be a mom. She always wanted kids, but it just never worked out for her. And she and I, well, we've talked about it. I'm almost 60. I've raised my child. I'm not looking to start over. She knows that. So this. You. It's a blessing for her too." His words were meant to be reassuring, to explain her behavior. But they had the opposite effect. They confirmed my deepest fear. Brenda wasn't just an excited future grandmother figure. She was trying to fill a void in her own life using my pregnancy, my child. My baby wasn't a grandchild to her, he was a do-over. The thought made me feel sick. The intrusions began to bleed from the virtual world into the real one. Packages started arriving at our apartment. A large box from a high-end baby boutique containing a ridiculously expensive diaper bag I would never use. A set of bamboo baby plates and utensils. A subscription box for developmentally appropriate toys for ages 0 to 3 months. There were no gift receipts, just little notes signed, with love, Grandma Brenda and Grandpa Robert. She was signing her name as Grandma already. She had given herself the title. "We have to do something," I told Leo one evening, staring at a brand new baby bouncer that had just been delivered, taking up a significant portion of our small living room. "This is out of control. Our apartment is filling up with stuff we didn't ask for and don't have room for." Leo, ever the pragmatist, nodded. "Okay. You're right. It's time to set a boundary. A gentle one, but a firm one." So, I called my dad. I knew talking to Brenda directly would likely result in a dramatic, tear-filled performance that I didn't have the energy to handle. I hoped that going through him, her partner, would be a softer, more effective approach. "Hey Dad," I started, choosing my words carefully. "Leo and I are so grateful for all the gifts you and Brenda have been sending. It's incredibly generous. But we're running out of space, and honestly, we'd love to be able to pick out some things for the baby ourselves. It's part of the fun for us." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Oh," he said, his voice flat. "I see. Brenda was just trying to help. She's so excited." "I know, and I appreciate that," I said, my patience wearing thin. "But this is our first baby, Dad. It's a special time for me and Leo. We want to experience it together. The constant packages and messages. It's becoming a little overwhelming." "Overwhelming?" He sounded genuinely baffled. "Amelia, she's just trying to show you she cares. I think you're being a little ungrateful. Most people would be thrilled to have this much support." The word ungrateful struck a nerve. It was a word that had been used against me my whole life whenever I tried to assert my own needs. I felt a familiar wave of frustration and anger wash over me. "It's not about being ungrateful, Dad. It's about boundaries. This is my pregnancy, my baby. Brenda needs to take a step back." "Don't be so harsh, Ames," he said, his voice taking on a pleading tone. "She's sensitive. This will crush her. Just let her have this. It makes her so happy. Let her have this." The implication was clear, my comfort was secondary to Brenda's happiness. My journey into motherhood was something to be given to someone else to make them feel better. We ended the conversation on a tense, unresolved note. I knew he hadn't really heard me. He had only heard a threat to the peace he so desperately craved in his own relationship. And then came the incident that pushed everything over the edge. The point of no return. Brenda sent me a text. "Big news. I've started clearing out the guest room at your dad's place. I found the most perfect shade of pale yellow paint, gender neutral and so calming. I'm going to start painting this weekend. It's going to be the perfect nursery for our little peanut." I stared at the message, my blood running cold. She hadn't asked. She had announced. She was taking a room in my childhood home, a home still filled with the lingering presence of my mother, and unilaterally deciding to turn it into a shrine for her own maternal fantasies. She was moving forward with the second nursery plan we had never, ever agreed to. I didn't text back. I didn't even know what to say. My hands were shaking. Leo came home from work to find me sitting on the sofa, still staring at my phone, my face pale. "What's wrong?" he asked immediately, sitting down beside me and putting his arm around my shoulders. I showed him the text. He read it, and his jaw tightened. "Okay," he said, his voice low and firm. "That's it. This has gone from overeager to completely unacceptable. She's going to paint the guest room, Leo," I whispered. That was my mom's sewing room before she got too sick. It's where she used to sit and read to me. There are still books of hers in the closet. I know, he said softly. She's not just crossing a line, Amelia. She's bulldozing right over it. The anger that had been simmering inside me for weeks finally boiled over. It wasn't just frustration anymore. It was a cold, hard rage. A protective fire for my memories, for my mother, and for the child growing inside me. I picked up the phone. Leo watched me, his expression supportive. He knew this was a call I had to make myself. I dialed my dad's number. He answered on the second ring, his voice cheerful. "Hi, sweetheart. What's up?" "I just got a text from Brenda," I said, my voice devoid of any warmth. "Oh. Great. About the nursery, right? Isn't it a wonderful idea? She's so thoughtful." His obliviousness was staggering. It was like he lived in an alternate reality, one where Brenda's actions were perfectly normal and my reactions were the problem. "No, Dad. It's not a wonderful idea," I said, my voice trembling with suppressed fury. "It is a completely inappropriate and presumptuous idea. We never agreed to this. I never agreed to this." Whoa, calm down, Ames," he said, his tone shifting to placating. "It's just a coat of paint. She's just trying to create a welcoming space for her grandchild. She's not his grandmother." The words exploded out of me before I could stop them. The line went silent. I had finally said the thing you're not supposed to say. The ugly, unspoken truth that had been hovering over every interaction. "Amelia, that is a cruel thing to say," he finally said, his voice laced with disappointment. "Brenda loves you. She loves this baby. She is part of this family. Being part of this family doesn't give her the right to take over my life." I was practically shouting now, tears of sheer frustration streaming down my face. "It doesn't give her the right to try and play mommy with my child because she has unresolved issues. And it sure as hell doesn't give her the right to paint over my mother's memories." "You always do this," he shot back, his own voice rising. "You've never given her a fair chance. You're always so cold to her. She tries so hard, and all you do is push her away. Why can't you just be happy that I'm happy?" The accusation felt like a slap in the face. It was the ultimate deflection. This wasn't about his happiness. This was about my sanity. This was about protecting my child. He was so terrified of confronting the problems in his relationship with Brenda that he was willing to sacrifice my peace of mind to avoid it. He was making me the villain of the story so he wouldn't have to be the one to have a difficult conversation. "This has nothing to do with you being happy," I said, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous whisper. "This has to do with your girlfriend steamrolling my life and you letting her do it. I have asked you, politely, to help me set some boundaries. You have refused. So now I'm telling you. This stops. The texts, the unwanted gifts, the nursery. All of it. It stops now. Tell her to put down the paintbrush, Dad. I'm serious." I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line, a long, weary sigh. "Amelia, you're being hysterical. You're pregnant and emotional. You're overreacting." That was it. The final dismissal. He wasn't just ignoring my feelings, he was invalidating them, blaming them on my pregnancy. He was refusing to see me as a rational adult with legitimate concerns. He was choosing her comfort over his daughter's. "You're right, I am pregnant," I said, my voice suddenly calm, all the emotion draining out of me, replaced by an icy resolve. "And I have to protect my baby and my own well-being. And right now, this situation is not healthy for either of us. So I'm done. I'm done trying to talk to you about this. I'm done dealing with her. This is your problem to fix." I hung up the phone before he could respond. I dropped it onto the sofa cushion as if it were on fire. The silence in the apartment was absolute. Leo moved closer, wrapping his arms around me as I finally let out a ragged sob. It wasn't a sob of sadness, but of pure, unadulterated rage and a profound sense of being utterly alone in this fight. My own father, the man who was supposed to be my staunchest ally, had just made it clear where his loyalties lay. And it wasn't with me. The battle lines had been drawn. The week that followed my explosive phone call with my dad was silent. Eerily so. Brenda's constant stream of texts ceased. No unexpected packages appeared at our door. The quiet was a relief, but it wasn't peaceful. It was the heavy, charged silence that comes after a thunderstorm, where you're still waiting to see what the lightning struck. I found myself checking my phone constantly, not out of hope, but out of a kind of paranoid vigilance. Leo was my shadow, my anchor. He'd find me staring into space and wordlessly bring me a cup of herbal tea. He took over dinner duties without being asked, filling our small apartment with the comforting smells of garlic and roasting vegetables. He didn't push me to talk about it, but he was always there, a solid presence that said, "You are not alone in this." "Maybe he got the message," Leo said one evening, as we sat on the couch, my feet propped up on his lap. "Maybe your call actually worked." "Maybe," I said, though I didn't believe it. I knew my father. He wasn't a problem solver, he was a problem smoother. He didn't fix cracks, he just papered over them. The silence didn't feel like a resolution. It felt like a retreat. He was biding his time, waiting for me to calm down, as he'd put it. I was right. The call came on a Friday afternoon. It was my dad. His voice was overly cheerful, a forced brightness that set my teeth on edge. "Ames. How are you feeling? How's my grandbaby?" he asked, as if our last conversation hadn't ended with me hanging up on him in a blind rage. "We're fine, Dad," I said, my voice neutral. "Good, good. Listen, things got a little heated last week," he said, breezing past the issue. "Emotions are running high, and that's understandable. Brenda feels just terrible that you're upset. We were thinking, why don't you and Leo come over for brunch on Sunday? We can clear the air. A fresh start. Clear the air." The phrase was so typical of him. It meant, let's pretend this never happened and go back to the way things were. It was a trap, and I knew it. But refusing would only give him more ammunition to paint me as the cold, unforgiving one. And a small, foolish part of me still hoped that maybe, just maybe, they had actually talked. Maybe Brenda understood now. "I'll have to check with Leo," I said, stalling. "Oh, he'll come," my dad said confidently. "We'll have waffles. Everyone loves waffles." I hung up the phone with a sense of weary resignation. Leo agreed we should go. "It's better to face it than to let it fester," he said. "We'll go, we'll be polite, and we'll be a united front. If she starts up again, we leave. Simple as that." His simple plan made me feel a little stronger. A united front. I could do that. Sunday arrived, gray and drizzly. As we pulled up to my dad's house, I saw that Brenda's car was in the driveway. A knot of dread tightened in my stomach. I took a deep breath before getting out of the car. "United front," I whispered to Leo. He squeezed my hand. "Always." Brenda greeted us at the door with another one of her tight hugs. "Amelia. I'm so glad you came," she said, her voice dripping with manufactured warmth. "I was so worried about you." My dad hovered behind her, smiling weakly. "Come on in, kids. The coffee's fresh." The air in the house was thick with unspoken tension. We sat at the dining room table, a plate of waffles placed in front of each of us. For a few minutes, the conversation was stilted and safe. The weather. A new show on Netflix. My dad's ongoing war with the squirrels. It was excruciatingly normal. Then, Brenda refilled my glass of orange juice. "You have to keep your fluids up," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "But not too much of this, I hope. The sugar content is shocking. It can lead to gestational diabetes, you know. We wouldn't want that for the baby." I froze with the glass halfway to my lips. Leo shot me a look. "This is it. The first volley." I put the glass down, my hand steady. "My doctor is very happy with my diet and my health, Brenda. But thank you for your concern." My tone was polite but firm. A clear boundary. She just laughed, a high, tinkling sound that grated on my nerves. "Oh, of course, dear. I'm just looking out for my two favorite people." She patted her own stomach, a bizarre, reflexive gesture. My dad, sensing the shift in tone, jumped in. "So, Ames, have you thought about, you know, names?" It was a clumsy but welcome change of subject. We talked about names for a while, Leo and I sharing a few of the more traditional options we were considering. Brenda listened, a small, thoughtful frown on her face. "Those are nice," she said when we finished. "Very classic. But you know, I was thinking I've always loved the name David. It's strong. It means, beloved. And it was my father's name. It would be such a beautiful way to honor family." She said it with such sincerity, as if it were a perfectly reasonable suggestion. That she, a woman I'd known for only a few months, should have a say in naming my son. That her family history should be a factor in my family's decision. I just stared at her, speechless. Leo, God bless him, jumped in. "That's a great name, Brenda," he said smoothly. "But Amelia and I have our own family traditions we're thinking about. It's a big decision." Brenda's smile tightened. "Well, just something to think about," she said, before turning her attention back to me. "Speaking of big decisions, I took the liberty of doing some research for you. I know you're planning on breastfeeding, which is wonderful, just the best thing for the baby. But it can be difficult at first. So I went ahead and booked you a consultation with the best lactation expert in Portland. Her name is Dr. Albright. The appointment is for next Thursday." She beamed at me, as if she had just handed me a winning lottery ticket. The audacity of it took my breath away. She had, without my knowledge or consent, scheduled a medical appointment for me. An appointment about one of the most personal, intimate aspects of becoming a mother. "You did what?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "I booked you an appointment," she repeated, her cheerfulness unwavering. "She has a 6-month waiting list, but I know someone who works in her office, and I was able to pull a few strings. For our baby, I'd do anything." My dad was nodding along, a proud look on his face. "Isn't that something, Ames? She's always thinking ahead." I looked from Brenda's expectant face to my father's clueless one. The United Front was a fine idea, but it was like trying to stop a tank with a picket sign. They didn't operate in a world of subtle cues and polite boundaries. They operated in a world where Brenda's desires were paramount. I pushed my chair back from the table. "I have to use the restroom," I said, my voice tight. It was an excuse. I just needed to escape the room before I said something I couldn't take back. I fled to the small bathroom down the hall, my heart pounding in my chest. I splashed cold water on my face, staring at my reflection in the mirror. My eyes were wide, my face pale. I looked trapped. Because I was. When I came back, Leo was already standing, his jacket in his hand. "We should get going," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "I have some work I need to finish up this afternoon." My dad and Brenda looked disappointed, but they didn't protest. The goodbyes were awkward. Brenda tried to hug me again, but I sidestepped it, pretending to be busy with my purse. As we walked to the car, I felt her eyes on my back. The final straw, the event that made me realize this was no longer a matter of annoyance but a matter of safety and sanity, happened 2 weeks later. I had my 20-week anatomy scan. It was a big milestone. The appointment where you can find out the sex of the baby, and where they check to make sure everything is developing properly. Leo had taken the morning off work to come with me. We were both giddy with a mixture of excitement and nerves. We were in the dark, cool examination room. The ultrasound technician, a kind woman named Maria, was moving the transducer over my gel-covered belly. The black and white image of our baby was on the screen. His little spine, the chambers of his heart, his tiny hands. It was magical. Then, Maria turned up the volume. A frantic, rhythmic thump-thump-thump filled the room. The sound of our son's heartbeat. Strong and steady. I squeezed Leo's hand, tears welling in my eyes. It was the most beautiful sound in the world. And then, a knock at the door. Maria looked annoyed. "I'm with a patient," she called out. The door opened anyway. And there stood Brenda, clutching her purse, a bright, triumphant smile on her face. "I'm so sorry to interrupt," she chirped, her eyes immediately finding the monitor. "I was just in the neighborhood for a showing, and I saw Leo's car in the parking lot. I just had to pop in and see if I could catch a glimpse of my grandson." I felt all the air leave my body. My blood ran cold. She was here. In my private medical appointment. She had hunted us down. Leo was on his feet in an instant, moving to block her path into the room. His body was tense, his expression thunderous. "Brenda, what are you doing here? This is a private appointment. You need to leave." "Oh, don't be silly, Leo," she said, trying to peer around him. "I'm family. I just want to hear the heartbeat." The technician, Maria, stood up, her professionalism cracking. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to wait outside. This is a violation of patient privacy." Brenda's face fell. She looked genuinely hurt, as if she couldn't comprehend why her presence would be anything but welcome. "But I just wanted to be a part of it." "Leave. Now," Leo said, his voice low and menacing. He wasn't asking. Defeated, Brenda finally backed out of the room, pulling the door closed behind her. The magical atmosphere was shattered. The sound of the heartbeat now seemed to echo in a room thick with violation. I was shaking, a cold sweat on my skin. I felt exposed, invaded. No space was safe. She had found me in my doctor's office. Where would she show up next? The delivery room? Our home? Maria, to her credit, was deeply apologetic and offered to reschedule, but I just wanted it to be over. We finished the scan in a haze, the joy completely gone, replaced by a deep, chilling dread. Driving home, I was silent. I just stared out the window at the rain-streaked streets of Portland. This wasn't just about an overbearing girlfriend anymore. This was about a woman whose obsession was escalating to a frightening degree. And my father, the man who should have been my protector, was her biggest enabler. He had created this monster, and now, it was hunting me. The incident at the ultrasound clinic changed something fundamental in me. The annoyance and frustration I'd been feeling hardened into a cold, protective anger. This was no longer about hurt feelings or family drama. It was about safety. My safe spaces had been breached, one by one. My phone, my home, and now, even the sanctity of a doctor's office. There was only one sanctuary left, one final boundary she had not yet crossed, my mother's memory, embodied by the house I grew up in. And I had a terrible premonition that it was next. Leo was furious. When we got home, he paced our small living room like a caged tiger. "That's it, Amelia. I'm done. I'm calling your dad and telling him his girlfriend is officially uninvited from our lives until she gets some serious help." "No," I said, my voice quiet but firm. He stopped pacing and looked at me, surprised. This is my battle, Leo. I have to be the one to fight it. If you call him, he'll just see it as you being the overprotective husband. He'll dismiss it. He only listens or pretends to listen to me. Then what are we going to do? He asked, his frustration palpable. Just wait for her to show up in the delivery room. Because I guarantee you, that's her next move. I don't know, I admitted, rubbing my temples where a headache was starting to bloom. But I know we can't keep playing defense. We can't keep reacting to what she does. I have to get ahead of it somehow. My chance came, ironically, in the form of an olive branch. A few days after the clinic disaster, my dad called. He didn't mention Brenda showing up at the appointment. I was sure she had spun him a story about a happy coincidence, a spontaneous, joyful moment that Leo and I had inexplicably ruined with our sensitivity. "Hey, Ames," he said, his voice casual. "I'm firing up the grill this Saturday. Just a casual barbecue. I thought maybe you and Leo could come over. It's supposed to be sunny. It'll be nice to just relax." Relax. The word was so absurd in this context that I almost laughed. But then an idea began to form in my mind. A risky, confrontational idea. "Sure, Dad," I found myself saying. "We'll be there." Leo looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "Are you serious? After what just happened? Why would you agree to that?" "Because you're right," I said, looking him in the eye. "We can't let it fester. And I'm tired of having these conversations over the phone where he can just hang up or talk over me. I'm going to face them, in that house. I'm going to make him see what she's doing. I have to. I had to draw my line in the sand. And what better place to do it than on the very ground I needed to protect?" The Saturday of the barbecue was, as predicted, a beautiful Portland day. The sun was warm, the sky was a brilliant blue, and the roses in my dad's garden were in full, fragrant bloom. It was the kind of day that should have felt hopeful. Instead, it felt like the calm before a battle. When we arrived, Brenda was a whirlwind of activity, flitting between the kitchen and the patio, wearing a bright yellow sundress. She greeted me with a cautious smile, her eyes darting to Leo, who stood beside me like a sentinel, his expression unreadable. She didn't try to hug me this time. A small victory. For the first hour, things were deceptively peaceful. We sat on the patio, making small talk. My dad was at the grill, flipping burgers, a happy, oblivious king in his little kingdom. I found myself lulled into a false sense of security. Maybe I had been wrong. Maybe this time would be different. Then, Brenda came over and sat in the chair next to me. She placed a tall glass of iced tea on the table beside me. "I made this just for you," she said sweetly. "Decaf, with a little bit of ginger. It's supposed to be good for morning sickness, even though you're past all that." "Thank you, Brenda," I said, my guard immediately back up. "That's thoughtful." "I just want to take care of you," she said, her voice dropping to a confidential whisper. She leaned in closer. "I wanted to apologize for the other day. At the clinic. I was just so excited, I wasn't thinking. I hope you can forgive me." Her apology sounded practiced, like something my dad had coached her to say. There was no real remorse in her eyes, only a calculated plea for absolution. "It was an inappropriate time and place, Brenda," I said, keeping my voice even. I know," she said, waving her hand dismissively, as if swatting away a fly. "But that's all in the past. Let's look to the future. To the baby." Her eyes lit up with that familiar, fervent glow. "Speaking of which, I have a surprise for you. Something I've been working on. Come with me." She stood up, her hand extended towards me. My heart began to pound. This was it. The moment I had been dreading. I glanced at Leo. He gave me a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. "I'm right here." I took a deep breath and stood up, ignoring her outstretched hand. Okay. Show me. She led me from the sunny patio back into the cool dimness of the house. She didn't head towards the guest room that she had threatened to paint. Instead, she led me down the familiar hallway, past the photos of my childhood, past the ghost of my mother's laughter, and stopped in front of a closed door. The door to my mother's study. It had been her sanctuary. A small room at the back of the house, filled with her books, her desk, her reading chair. After she died, my dad and I had kept it exactly as she'd left it. It was a time capsule. A sacred space. I hadn't been inside it in years, but knowing it was there, untouched, was a comfort. I know how much this room means to you, Brenda said softly, her hand on the doorknob. How much your mother means to you. And I think she would love this. She turned the knob and pushed the door open. And my world tilted on its axis. The room was changed. My mother's comfortable, worn armchair was still in the corner. Her old wooden desk was still against the wall. But the rest of the room, her space, had been violated. In one corner, where a tall, overflowing bookshelf used to stand, there was now a pristine white bassinet. A mobile with pastel-colored stars dangled over it. On the floor beside it was a fluffy, sheep-shaped rug. A small stack of board books sat on the corner of my mother's desk, next to a brand-new diaper pail. Brenda had taken this hallowed ground, this memorial to the mother I had lost, and turned it into her own personal nursery. She hadn't just crossed a line, she had desecrated a grave. I couldn't breathe. A roar started in my ears, blocking out all other sound. I saw my mother's face in my mind, her gentle smile, the way she would look up from a book as I entered the room. And now, this. This sacrilege. What did you do? I whispered, the words barely audible. Brenda beamed, completely oblivious to the storm gathering inside me. Isn't it perfect? I thought, instead of a whole separate room, we could create a little baby nook right here. It's so cozy. And this way, when he's here, he can be surrounded by the memory of the grandmother he never got to meet. It's like she's a part of his life, right from the start. I moved her books into boxes in the garage, they're perfectly safe. She put my mother's books in boxes. In the garage. Something inside me snapped. The carefully constructed dam of politeness, of restraint, of trying to be the bigger person, shattered into a million pieces. All the frustration, all the anger, all the grief I had been swallowing for months erupted in a torrent of pure, undiluted rage. Get it out, I snarled, my voice a low, guttural sound I didn't recognize as my own. Brenda's smile vanished. What? Get it all out. Now. I pointed a trembling finger at the bassinet, at the rug, at the pile of books. How dare you? How dare you come into this room, my mother's room, and do this? You have no right. No right. My voice rose with every word until I was screaming. I was vaguely aware of footsteps hurrying down the hall, of my dad and Leo appearing in the doorway, their faces masks of shock. But I couldn't stop. This is not your nursery. I shrieked at Brenda, who had shrunk back against the wall, her face pale with shock. This is not your baby. This is not your do-over. You do not get to erase my mother to make room for your own twisted fantasy. Amelia, for God's sake, calm down, my dad yelled, rushing forward to put a hand on my arm. I shook him off with a violence that surprised both of us. No. I will not calm down. Did you know about this? Did you let her do this? My dad looked from me to the corner of the room, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of genuine understanding, of horror, in his eyes. He hadn't known. Or if he had, he hadn't understood the magnitude of what he was allowing. She said she was just adding a few things. A few things? I laughed, a raw, hysterical sound. She put my mother in a box, Dad. She tried to replace her. And you just stood by and let it happen because you're too much of a coward to say no to her. Tears were streaming down my face now, hot and angry. I turned back to Brenda, who was starting to cry, her face crumbling into a mask of victimhood. You want to be a mother so badly, Brenda? Then go find a way to do it that doesn't involve hijacking my life and my child. He is not your emotional support animal. He is my son. Leo stepped forward, his face grim. He gently took my arm. Amelia, let's go. His touch broke the spell. I let him lead me out of the room, away from the scene of desecration. As we walked down the hall, I could hear Brenda's sobs escalating, and my dad's frantic, useless attempts to comfort her. We didn't say a word as we got in the car. We didn't say a word as we drove away from the house, leaving the perfect sunny day behind. I stared out the window, my whole body trembling. The battle was over. I had said everything. The ugly, unspoken truths were now laid bare on the floor of my mother's study, right next to a fluffy, sheep-shaped rug. There was no going back. The bridges weren't just burned, they had been nuked from orbit. And in the smoking crater of our family, I felt a strange and terrible sense of peace. The worst had happened. And I had survived. The drive home was silent, but it was a different kind of silence than before. It wasn't tense or angry. It was the hollow silence of aftermath. The air after a detonation. My body had stopped trembling, replaced by a profound, bone-deep exhaustion. I felt like I had been hollowed out, every last emotion scooped out of me and left behind on my father's floor. Leo pulled into our parking spot and turned off the engine. He didn't move to get out. He just sat there, his hands resting on the steering wheel, and looked at me. His expression wasn't one of pity or shock. It was one of deep, quiet pride. I have never been more in awe of you than I am right now, he said, his voice soft. Tears pricked my eyes again, but these were different. They weren't born of rage or grief. They were tears of relief, of being seen and understood. I was horrible, Leo. I screamed at her. I screamed at my dad. You were honest, he corrected gently. You said what needed to be said for months. She trespassed on something sacred, Amelia. And your dad enabled her. You had every right to be angry. He looked so lost, I whispered, thinking of my father's face, the dawning horror as he truly saw what Brenda had done. Like he genuinely didn't understand what he had allowed. That's the problem, Leo said, his voice laced with a frustration he rarely showed. He doesn't think. He just reacts to keep the peace. He's so desperate to avoid conflict with Brenda that he doesn't consider the consequences for you. Today, he finally had to look at those consequences. He couldn't ignore them. We went inside, and I collapsed onto the sofa, feeling the weight of the last few months, the last few hours, settle on me like a lead blanket. Leo ordered takeout, and we ate in comfortable silence, the television murmuring in the background. I felt strangely calm. I had detonated a bomb in the middle of my family, and the world hadn't ended. I was still here. My baby was still safe inside me. My husband was by my side. My little world, the one that truly mattered, was intact. My phone, which I had left on the kitchen counter, remained silent for the rest of the night. No frantic calls from my dad. No tearful texts from Brenda. The silence was absolute. It seemed that for once, I had left them speechless. The next day, a Sunday, was quiet and gray. I slept late, a deep, dreamless sleep. When I finally emerged, Leo had made pancakes. We spent the day in a quiet cocoon, reading on the sofa, talking about the baby, a real conversation about names this time, just the two of us. It felt like we were reclaiming our own joy, our own journey, from the noise that had been trying to drown it out. The call came late that afternoon. It was my dad. I braced myself for another round of accusations, of being told I was cruel and hysterical. Leo saw me hesitate and gave my hand a supportive squeeze. I answered, putting the phone on speaker. "Hello? Amelia." His voice was different. It wasn't angry or pleading. It was tired. Defeated. Can I come over? I need to talk to you. Alone." I looked at Leo. He nodded. "Okay, Dad," I said. "Come over." An hour later, he was standing at our door. He looked older than he had just a day before. The lines on his face seemed deeper, his shoulders slumped. He held a small, wilting bouquet of grocery store daisies, a classic Robert Peace offering. He looked like a man who hadn't slept. Leo greeted him politely. "I'm going to run to the store," he said, giving me a knowing look. "You two should talk." He gave my shoulder a quick squeeze and left, leaving me and my father alone. We sat in our small living room, the awkward silence stretching between us. He placed the flowers on the coffee table. "I'm sorry," he began, his voice raspy. He wouldn't look at me, staring instead at his hands, which he wrung in his lap. "I am so sorry, Amelia. For yesterday. For all of it." It was the first time he had apologized without a "but" attached. No excuses, no justifications. Just an apology. I waited, not sure what to say. "I never should have let it get that far," he continued, his voice thick with emotion. "When I saw that room. When I saw your face. I finally understood. I saw what I had been letting happen. I was so caught up in keeping Brenda happy, that I completely ignored what it was doing to you." He finally looked at me, his eyes filled with a shame and regret that was so profound it was painful to witness. "I failed you, Ames. As a father. My job is to protect you, and I didn't. I let my own loneliness, my own cowardice, put you in an impossible position. I am so sorry." A single tear rolled down his cheek, and he wiped it away angrily. My dad was not a man who cried easily. Seeing him this broken, this raw, chipped away at the wall of anger I had built around my heart. "Why, Dad?" I asked, my voice softer than I intended. "Why did you let her? Why is her happiness more important than my peace of mind?" He let out a long, shuddering breath. "Because I'm a weak man, Amelia. After your mother." The house was so quiet. The silence was deafening. I was so damn lonely. And then Brenda came along, and she was life. She was loud and bright and full of energy, and she filled up all the empty spaces. I loved that. I needed that. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. I knew, from the beginning, that she wanted kids more than anything. And I told her, right from the start, that it wasn't in the cards for me. I'm too old. I don't have the energy. I've done it. I was clear. I thought she understood. I thought she had accepted it. He shook his head, a look of dawning, painful realization on his face. But she didn't. She just transferred that hope. That desperation. First, it was just talk. Then, when you announced you were pregnant, it was like a switch flipped. The baby became her project. Her second chance. And I let it happen. Because I was terrified that if I said no to her, if I pushed back, she would leave. And I would be alone again in that silent house. It was selfish. It was cowardly. And it was so unfair to you. It was the most honest he had ever been with me. He was laying all his cards on the table, all his fears, all his weaknesses. He wasn't making excuses, he was offering an explanation. It didn't erase the hurt, but it made it understandable. He wasn't a malicious man. He was a flawed, lonely man who had made a series of terrible, selfish choices out of fear. What did she say? I asked quietly. After we left. He sighed. She cried. 4 hours. She said you hated her. That you were trying to take the baby away from her. She didn't see what she did wrong. At all. She truly believes that what she did in your mother's study was a beautiful, loving gesture. She can't understand why you would see it as a violation. He looked at me, his eyes pleading for me to understand. She's not a bad person, Ames. She's just broken. She's so desperate for a child that she's blind to everything else. She sees this baby as the cure for all her pain. But he's not a cure, Dad, I said firmly. He's a person. My person. And I can't let her use him to fix herself. It's not fair to him. I know, he whispered. I know that now. I told her that. I told her she had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. I told her she had to give you space. That all the nursery stuff had to stop, immediately. And what did she say? He looked down at his hands again. She said she would try. But I don't know if she can, Amelia. I honestly don't know. The obsession is. It's deep. We sat in silence for another long moment. The truth of the situation hung in the air between us. My father was in an impossible relationship with a woman whose desperation was making her toxic. And he was trapped by his own fear of being alone. He had finally acknowledged the problem, but I could see he had no idea how to solve it. He had apologized, but he hadn't offered a solution. I love you, Dad, I said, and I meant it. But I can't live like this. I can't spend the rest of my pregnancy, the first years of my son's life, constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next boundary to be crossed. I can't. I know, he said, his voice full of despair. What do we do? I took a deep breath. The moment had come. The moment where I had to move from reacting to the past to dictating the future. The moment where I had to take control, not just for me, but for my son. I knew what I had to say. It would be hard, and it would probably break his heart a little more. But it was necessary. The survival of my own little family depended on it. I looked at my father, at the portrait of a man drowning in his own life, and a profound sense of clarity washed over me. The anger was gone, replaced by a sad, resolute calm. For months, I had been waiting for him to fix this. I had been pleading, arguing, and finally screaming, all in the hope that he would step up and be the father I needed him to be, a protector, a gatekeeper. But his confession hadn't been a promise of change, it was an admission of defeat. He couldn't fix this. He was as much a victim of his own choices as I was. The realization was both liberating and terrifying. I couldn't rely on him. I was truly on my own in this. The responsibility to protect my son, my home, and my sanity rested squarely on my shoulders. And in that moment, I grew up in a way I hadn't before. I was no longer just Robert's daughter. I was this baby's mother. And a mother's first duty is to shield her child from harm. I straightened my back, my voice losing its softness and taking on a new, unshakable firmness. What we do, I said, correcting his helpless question, is no longer the issue. The question is what you are going to do. But whatever that is, it can no longer involve me. He looked up, his face a mask of confusion. What do you mean? I mean I am officially bowing out, I said, the words tasting like cold, hard steel. I'm done. I'm done being the battleground for your relationship problems. I'm done being the reason you and Brenda fight. I'm done being the subject of her obsessions. I leaned forward, making sure he was looking me directly in the eye, so there could be no misunderstanding, no room for his usual evasiveness. This is what is going to happen from now on. You and Brenda need to figure out your future. You need to have the real, painful, honest conversation you've been avoiding for years. Does she want a life with you more than she wants a child of her own? Are you willing to live with her resentment if she stays? Can she ever truly accept that you will not have more children? These are your questions to answer. Not mine. He opened his mouth to speak, but I held up a hand to stop him. I'm not finished. While you are figuring that out, my life, and my baby's life, will be off limits to her. No more texts. No more calls. No more surprise visits. No more unsolicited advice or gifts. Nothing. If you want to see me, you come alone. If you want to talk to me, you call me yourself. The color drained from his face. Amelia, you can't. She's part of my life. You're asking me to choose. No, I'm not, I said, my voice unwavering. I am not telling you to break up with her. That is your decision. I am telling you what my boundaries are. I am protecting my son. If Brenda can respect those boundaries, if she can get help for her issues and learn to have a healthy, respectful relationship with me and my family, then things can change in the future. But right now, the trust is gone. It's been shattered. And I will not expose my child to her instability. End of story. He slumped back into the couch, the weight of my words pressing down on him. He looked utterly lost. He had come here for a solution, for me to somehow make it all okay, and instead, I had handed him an ultimatum. Not one born of anger, but of cold, hard necessity. So what happens now? He whispered. We just don't see each other. I love you, Dad, I said, and the sincerity in my voice seemed to surprise him. I will always love you. And I want you in my life. And I want you in your grandson's life. But I can't have her in mine right now. Not like this. So the ball is in your court. You can have a relationship with me and your grandchild, under these conditions. Or you can continue to let Brenda's behavior dictate everything. But if you choose that path, you are choosing it without us. I was drawing a line, not between him and Brenda, but between his chaotic world and my peaceful one. He could cross the line to visit me, but he couldn't bring the chaos with him. He didn't have an answer. He just sat there, staring at the floor, the full, crushing weight of his predicament finally settling on him. He could no longer smooth things over. He could no longer pretend. He had to make a choice. Not between two women, but between two futures, one of continued, placating denial, and one of difficult, painful honesty. After a long, heavy silence, he stood up. He didn't look at me. I have to go, he mumbled. He walked to the door like a man in a trance, leaving the sad little bouquet of daisies forgotten on the table. He didn't say goodbye. He just opened the door and left, closing it softly behind him. I stood in the silence of my living room, my heart aching. I had just pushed my father away, possibly for good. I had given him a choice that I knew, in his conflict-avoidant heart, he was ill-equipped to make. The bond between us, already strained, felt stretched to its absolute breaking point. It felt like I had just watched him walk out of my life. When Leo came back, he found me standing in the exact same spot. He saw the flowers on the table and my expression, and he knew. He didn't say, "I told you so." He didn't say anything. He just came and wrapped his arms around me, holding me while I cried. I cried for my dad, for the man I wished he could be. I cried for the simple, happy family I had always dreamed of. And I cried for the loss of my own innocence, the realization that sometimes, to protect the ones you love, you have to be willing to hurt the others. The next few weeks were a void. A vast, empty space where my father used to be. He didn't call. He didn't text. It was as if he had vanished. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart would leap with a painful mix of hope and dread, but it was never him. I threw myself into preparing for the baby with a frantic energy. Leo and I painted the small spare room in our apartment a soft, calming sage green. We assembled the crib we had chosen and bought together. We washed tiny onesies and folded them into neat piles. Each act was a declaration of independence, a way of building the walls of our own little fortress, a safe harbor for the three of us. But at night, in the quiet moments before sleep, the doubt would creep in. Had I been too harsh? Had I pushed him away forever? I would lie there, one hand on my swelling belly, and feel a profound sense of loss. I had won the war for my boundaries, but it felt like I had lost my father in the process. One evening, about a month after my dad's visit, I was scrolling through a neighborhood Facebook group when I saw a post that made my blood run cold. It was from a woman I didn't know. Does anyone have a recommendation for a good, reliable contractor? My neighbor's girlfriend has been renovating his house for a month and it's a disaster. She's been throwing out furniture, tearing things up. I feel so bad for him. He looks miserable. The post included a photo, taken from across the street. It was blurry, but unmistakable. It was my father's house. And there, on the front lawn, was a pile of junk. Old chairs, boxes, and what looked like the frame of a bookshelf. My mother's bookshelf. Brenda wasn't just creating a nursery. She was erasing my mother. She was getting my childhood home, my father's home, and rebuilding it in her own image. And my father. My father was letting her. He hadn't chosen me. He hadn't chosen honesty. He had chosen the path of least resistance. He had chosen to let her have her way, no matter the cost. I felt a dizzying sense of vertigo, of falling. The last, flickering ember of hope that he would do the right thing was extinguished. He was gone. He had been swallowed whole by Brenda's desperation and his own fear. I had set a boundary, and in response, they had built a fortress of their own, one I was no longer welcome in. All was lost. My father was lost. And I was completely, utterly alone. Seeing that picture of my childhood home being dismantled, piece by piece, on a public forum was a different kind of pain. It wasn't the hot rage of a violated sanctuary or the cold sorrow of a broken bond. It was a quiet, resigned grief. It was like watching a ship you love sink slowly beneath the waves from a distant shore. You can't stop it. You can only watch until it's gone. Leo was incandescent with rage when I showed him the post. He's letting her throw your mother's things away. He's letting her get the house. He grabbed his phone. I'm calling him. This is monstrous. No, I said, putting my hand on his arm. My voice was calm, eerily so. Don't. It's done, Leo. What's the point? To yell at him? To make him feel worse than he already does? The post said he looks miserable. I believe it. So we just do nothing? He asked, incredulous. We let her obliterate your entire childhood. What she's doing isn't about me anymore, I said, the words forming with a clarity that surprised me. This is about her and him. She's not just building a nursery, she's trying to build a new life, a new history, one that has no room for my mom. Or for me. It's her last, desperate attempt to win. And he is letting her because he has given up. He's too weak to fight. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but I knew it was the truth. My ultimatum hadn't empowered him, it had broken him. Faced with a choice between a difficult confrontation and passive surrender, he had chosen surrender. The house was his sacrifice. And so, a strange peace settled over me. It was the peace of acceptance. The fight was over because I was no longer fighting. I couldn't force my father to be strong. I couldn't cure Brenda of her obsession. All I could do was protect my own small corner of the world. The weeks turned into a month, then two. My belly grew round and firm. The baby's kicks became stronger, more insistent. He was a constant, living reminder of what truly mattered. Leo and I fell into a new rhythm, one that didn't include my father. We went to birthing classes. We finalized our birth plan. We debated the merits of different diaper brands. We built our own world, brick by brick. The silence from my father was absolute. It was a gaping hole in my life, an amputation I was still learning to live with. I missed him. I missed the man he was before all this, the dad who would patiently explain historical events, the man who taught me how to ride a bike. I mourned him like he was already gone. Sometimes, I would find myself thinking about Brenda. I didn't feel anger towards her anymore. I felt a profound, aching pity. I imagined her in my father's house, a house that wasn't hers, surrounded by new furniture and fresh paint, desperately trying to fill a void that was unfillable. She hadn't gotten what she wanted. She hadn't gotten a baby. She had only gotten a broken man and an empty house. It was a hollow victory. My own journey into motherhood became my singular focus. I read books, not about what to expect, but about the kind of parent I wanted to be. I thought about my own mother, Eleanor. I thought about the legacy she had left me, a legacy of quiet strength, of fierce love, of the importance of creating safe spaces. The study she had cherished wasn't just a room, it was a physical manifestation of her values. And I realized that's what I was doing now. I was building a new sanctuary, not of wood and plaster, but of principles. My child would be raised in a home where boundaries were respected, where emotions were validated, and where love was not a tool for control. My baby shower was a small, intimate affair. Just a few close friends in our apartment, with cake and silly games. There was a moment, as I opened a gift, a hand-knitted blanket from Leo's mother, that I felt a sharp pang of sadness. My dad should have been there. In another life, a better life, he would have been there, beaming with pride, telling embarrassing stories about my childhood. The absence was a physical presence in the room, a ghost at the feast. But I pushed the feeling down. I smiled, thanked my mother-in-law, and focused on the love that was in the room, not the love that was missing. One rainy Tuesday, about 2 weeks before my due date, my phone rang. The screen displayed, "Dad." My heart hammered against my ribs. I hadn't heard from him in almost 3 months. I let it ring 3 times before finally answering, my hand trembling slightly. "Hello? Ames?" His voice was hesitant, fragile. "Hi. Hi, Dad. I saw your friend Sarah's pictures from the baby shower on Facebook," he said. It looked nice. "You look beautiful." "Thanks," I said, not knowing what else to say. "I miss you," he whispered, and the words were so full of pain that it broke my heart. "I'm so sorry, Amelia. For everything. I miss you too, Dad." An awkward silence fell between us. I could hear him take a shaky breath. "Listen, I know I have no right to ask this. But could we have lunch? Just once. Before the baby comes. I need to see you." I should have said no. I should have protected my peace. But I heard the desperation in his voice, the sheer loneliness, and the daughter in me, the one who still loved him despite everything, couldn't refuse. "Okay," I said. "Where?" We met at a quiet diner halfway between our homes, a neutral territory. When he walked in, I was shocked by his appearance. He had lost weight, and his face was gaunt. The spark in his eyes was gone, replaced by a deep, weary sadness. He looked like a man who had been hollowed out from the inside. He slid into the booth opposite me, his movements slow and tired. For a few minutes, we just sat there. The waitress came and took our order. Dad ordered a coffee he didn't touch. "The house is done," he said finally, staring into his cup. "Brenda. She finished it." "I know," I said quietly. "I saw a picture." He flinched, knowing what I meant. "She threw a lot of things out," he said, his voice barely a whisper. Your mother's things. I tried to stop her with some of it. The books from her study. I have them. In the garage. But a lot of it. It's gone. He looked up at me, his eyes pleading for forgiveness. I'm so sorry. It was just stuff, Dad, I said, and to my surprise, I meant it. The anger over the physical objects had faded. The memories are what matter. He nodded, though he didn't look convinced. Brenda is not happy, Ames, he continued, as if he needed to unburden himself. She got what she wanted. A new house, a new life. But she's not happy. Because it's empty. The nursery is perfect. It looks like something out of a magazine. But there's no baby in it. And there's never going to be. He took a sip of his cold coffee. She's angry. All the time. At me. At you. At the world. She walks through that new, perfect house like a ghost. And the silence. It's back. It's louder than it ever was before. I didn't say anything. I just listened. He was living in the prison he had built for himself. I made a mistake, he said, his voice cracking. A terrible, terrible mistake. I chose being comfortable over being a good father. I chose to ignore the truth because I was afraid of being alone. And now. I've lost you, and I'm more alone than I've ever been in my life. He was crying now, silent tears rolling down his weathered cheeks into his coffee cup. He didn't bother to wipe them away. It was the raw, unfiltered confession of a broken man. He wasn't asking for a solution anymore. He was just stating the facts of his own ruin. I reached across the table and, for the first time in months, I took his hand. It felt thin and cold. You haven't lost me, Dad, I said softly. But things have changed. I have to be a mother now. And my priority has to be my son. He squeezed my hand, a flicker of the old warmth returning. I know. You're going to be a wonderful mother. So much better than. So much stronger than I ever was as a father. We sat there, holding hands across the sticky diner table, a father and a daughter adrift in the wreckage of their family. Nothing was fixed. The future was still a vast, uncertain territory. But in that moment, a small seed of something new was planted. Not forgiveness, not yet. But understanding. A shared grief for all that had been lost. It wasn't a happy ending. It wasn't even a new beginning. It was just a moment of truth. And for now, it was enough. The baby came a week later. My son. He arrived in a flurry of chaos and pain and overwhelming, world-altering love. His name was Theodore, but we called him Theo. He was small and perfect, with a tuft of dark hair like his father's and my quiet, observant eyes. Holding him for the first time, feeling his tiny, warm body against mine, was like feeling my own heart beating outside of my chest. Everything else, the drama, the anger, the hurt, it all faded into the background. He was the foreground. He was the whole picture. The hospital room was a revolving door of visitors. Leo's parents came, their faces beaming, bringing tiny socks and a ridiculously large teddy bear. My close friends visited, cooing over Theo's tiny fingers and whispering about how much he looked like Leo. Every visit was a wave of warmth and joy. My dad came on the second day. He came alone. He stood hesitantly at the door, holding a small, clumsily wrapped gift. He looked even more tired than he had at the diner, but there was a new light in his eyes. A fragile, hopeful light. "Hi," he said softly. "Hi, Dad," I said, shifting Theo in my arms. "Come in." He walked over to the bed slowly, as if approaching a wild, easily startled creature. His eyes were fixed on the little bundle in my arms. He looked mesmerized, terrified, and utterly captivated all at once. He's so small," he whispered. He's perfect, I said, a smile spreading across my face. Can I? He trailed off, his hands clasped in front of him, not daring to reach out. It was a stark contrast to Brenda's entitled grasping. He was asking for permission. I nodded, carefully shifting Theo's weight and guiding him into my father's trembling arms. My dad held his grandson for the first time, his large, rough hands looking enormous around Theo's tiny body. He just stared down at the baby's face, his own face a canvas of conflicting emotions. I could see the joy, the awe, but also the profound sadness, the regret for all the moments he had almost missed. A tear escaped his eye and landed on Theo's blanket. He looks like your mother, he choked out. Around the eyes. I nodded, my own throat tight. I know. He stayed for an hour. He didn't mention Brenda. He didn't talk about the house. He just held Theo, or sat quietly by the bed, watching him sleep. When he left, he hugged me, a real, solid hug. I love you, Ames, he said. I'm so proud of you. It felt like a truce. A fragile, unspoken agreement to move forward, one careful step at a time. The real world, with all its complications, was waiting for us when we brought Theo home. The first few weeks were a blur of sleepless nights, endless feedings, and a love so fierce it was almost painful. Our little apartment, our sanctuary, was filled with the sounds of a newborn, tiny cries, soft gurgles, and the constant hum of the baby monitor. Then, the cold open from the beginning of our story came to pass, but not in the way one might have expected. It wasn't a physical confrontation, but a digital one. A text message from a number I didn't recognize, though I knew instinctively who it was from. It was a picture. A photo of a beautifully decorated room, the one from my father's house, with a crib and a mobile and a fluffy sheep rug. The caption read, "The nursery is all ready and waiting for our little angel. We can't wait to have him over. When can we see him? Love, Grandma Brenda." I stared at the message, at the audacity of it. The use of "we." The title she had given herself. The complete and utter denial of reality. After everything that had happened, after the silence, after the pain, she was trying to act as if nothing had changed. As if her fantasy could still become reality through sheer force of will. I showed the text to Leo. He read it, and a muscle in his jaw clenched. "Unbelievable," he muttered. "She is genuinely delusional." The old Amelia would have spiraled. She would have been enraged, or panicked, or dissolved into tears. But the new Amelia, Theo's mother, felt something else entirely. A calm, clear certainty. She had no power over me anymore. They were words on a screen, echoes from a life that was no longer mine. I didn't reply to the message. I simply blocked the number. With one tap of my finger, I erected a digital wall, a final, definitive boundary. It wasn't a dramatic act of war. It was a quiet act of housekeeping. I was simply cleaning up my life, getting rid of the clutter that no longer served me or my son. A few days later, my dad called. "Hey," he started, his voice strained. "Brenda is very upset. She said you blocked her number." "I did," I said, my voice calm. I was rocking Theo in his bassinet, and I didn't want to disturb his sleep. "She doesn't understand," he said, and I could hear the exhaustion in his voice. The sound of a man who had been fighting a losing battle. "She says she was just trying to reach out, to be friendly." "Dad," I said, stopping him before he could continue down that familiar, pleading path. "I told you what my boundaries were. She crossed them. It's that simple. Her feelings about it are not my responsibility. And frankly, they're not yours either." There was a long pause on the line. I could hear him breathing. "You're right," he said finally, his voice heavy with resignation. "You are absolutely right." It wasn't an agreement born of conviction, but one of pure exhaustion. He was done fighting for her reality. "I have to go," Dad. Theo is waking up. Okay, he said. Can I come see him on Saturday? Just for a little while. Of course, I said. Come by around noon. But come alone. And that's how it is now. A new, fragile normal. My dad visits once or twice a week. He comes alone. He holds Theo, tells him stories, and looks at him with a love that is tinged with a permanent sadness. He never mentions Brenda, and I never ask. Their life together exists in a separate world, a world I have no desire to enter. I don't know if they will stay together. I don't know if he will ever find true peace. His choices are his own, and so are his consequences. My life is here, in this small apartment, filled with the scent of baby powder and fresh coffee. It's in the weight of my son sleeping on my chest, his small hand curled around my finger. It's in the easy, loving smiles Leo and I share over the top of Theo's head. It's a small life, a quiet life, but it's a life built on a foundation of solid, unshakable love and respect. Sometimes, late at night, when the city is quiet, I think about the ultimatum I gave my father. I wonder if I did the right thing. But then I look at Theo, at his innocent, sleeping face, and I know that I did. I chose him. I chose my peace. I chose to be the mother he deserves. The future is uncertain. Families are messy, complicated things. But for the first time in a very long time, I feel safe. I feel strong. I know who I am. I am Amelia, a designer, a wife, a daughter. But more than anything else, I am a mother. And I have what it takes to deal with whatever comes next.